Nobody moves, or this little princess loses her scholarship opportunity right now. Principal Margaret Whitmore's manicured hand gripped 12-year-old Sophia's shoulder hard enough to make the child wince, her other hand waving a folder containing the girl's academic records over a trash can. The Roosevelt Middle School auditorium fell into stunned silence as 300 parents and students watched their beloved principal transform into something monstrous. Sophia Gonzalez stood frozen on stage in her traditional folkloric dress, tears streaming down her face as her dance performance music continued playing to an empty stage. You people think you can just waltz into our prestigious school district and contaminate it with your welfare culture? Whitmore's voice dripped with venom as she scanned predominantly Latino and black families in the audience. This talent show is canceled. This whole charade of pretending your children have talent worth showcasing is over. School Board President Richard Brennan and Vice Principal Derek Hayes flanked Whitmore like enforcers, their expensive suits and cold expressions making them look more like corporate raiders and educators. They began ripping down the colorful decorations parents had spent weeks creating, tearing apart the beautiful papal picado and student artwork that transformed the austere auditorium into a celebration of diversity. Maria Gonzalez sat in the third row, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring ready to explode. 6 months of undercover work documenting the school administration's drug distribution network. 6 months pretending to be a struggling single mother working 2 jobs. 6 months of watching these criminals poison children while maintaining their facade of educational excellence. Her hand instinctively moved toward her concealed badge, but she forced herself to remain still. Not yet. The FBI surveillance van outside was recording everything. She needed them to fully incriminate themselves. "Mom." Sophia's terrified voice cut through the chaos as Whitmore shook her harder. "Mom, help me." That single plea shattered Maria's professional restraint. No investigation was worth her daughter's trauma. As she rose from her seat, she pulled out her phone with deliberate calm, her movements catching Whitmore's attention. "Sit down, Ms. Gonzalez." Whitmore commanded with the authority of someone who'd never been challenged. "Your illegal immigrant daughter is about to learn what happens when people don't know their place in society." Maria's laugh was cold enough to freeze blood. "Illegal immigrant? My daughter was born in Fort Worth, has a 4.0 GPA, and speaks 3 languages fluently. But you already knew that from the background check you illegally ran on my family 3 months ago." The principal's face flickered with uncertainty, but she doubled down on her aggression. "I don't care where she was born. Her kind doesn't belong in our schools, contaminating real American children with their drugs and gang culture." "Speaking of drugs," Maria said, speed dialing a number she knew by heart, "let's talk about the 20 kilograms of cocaine you've been storing in the school's basement, or the methamphetamine lab you're running in the abandoned wing, or the fact that you've been using honor students as drug mules by hiding product in their backpacks during field trips." The auditorium erupted in gasps and confused murmurs. Whitmore's grip on Sophia loosened as the blood drained from her face. Brennan and Hayes exchanged panicked glances, their hands moving toward their phones. "This is Special Agent Maria Gonzalez, badge number 7823. Maria spoke clearly into her phone, her voice carrying across the now-silent auditorium. "Execute Operation Schoolyard. All units move in. Suspect are attempting to destroy evidence and have made physical contact with minor." The transformation was instantaneous. The submissive single mother disappeared, replaced by a federal agent with 12 years of experience dismantling drug operations. Maria pulled out her badge, the gold DA shield catching stage lights as she held it high for everyone to see. "Principal Margaret Whitmore, Richard Brennan, Derek Hayes," she announced with absolute authority. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, endangering minors, civil rights violations, and operating a criminal enterprise through an educational institution." The sound of helicopters suddenly filled the air, their rotors creating a thunderous symphony that rattled the auditorium windows. Through the large glass doors, parents could see DEA tactical units surrounding the building, their black uniforms and automatic weapons creating a surreal contrast to the Roosevelt Middle School Excellence in Education banner hanging outside. Whitmore released Sophia completely, stumbling backward as her world collapsed around her. "You're lying," she whispered desperately. "This is entrapment. You can't do this. 6 months, Maria said conversationally as she moved toward the stage to retrieve her daughter. 6 months of watching you poison this community while pretending to educate its children. 6 months of documenting every drug shipment, every payment, every child you recruited into your operation. She pulled Sophia into a protective embrace, feeling her daughter's body shaking with shock and relief. 6 months of listening to you call my daughter and her classmates contamination, while you were the real disease in this school. The auditorium doors burst open as DEA agents flooded in, their weapons drawn but lowered, moving with the precision of a well-rehearsed operation. Parents pulled their children close. Some recorded with their phones, while others sat in stunned disbelief that their trusted educators were drug dealers. "Clear the basement," the tactical team leader announced into his radio. 20 kilos of cocaine confirmed, along with package of materials and distribution records. The chemistry lab is exactly where Agent Gonzalez indicated. Brennan tried to run toward the emergency exit, but found it blocked by agents who'd anticipated his escape route. Hayes fell to his knees, his designer suit pulling around him as he began sobbing about cooperation and reduced sentences. But Whitmore stood frozen, her carefully constructed world of superiority and control shattered beyond repair. "You called my daughter's culture contamination," Maria continued, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "But you were running drugs through her school. You called these families welfare cases while you drove a Porsche paid for with drug money. You destroyed this talent show because you couldn't stand seeing these children succeed despite your efforts to destroy them." Agent Sarachun, Maria's handler throughout the operation, approached with handcuffs ready. "Ma'am, we have warrants for 17 additional suspects, including 3 more school board members, 2 city councilmen, and 6 teachers who were participating in the distribution network." The scope of the revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled families. Parents who trusted these educators with their children's futures realized they'd been sending them into a criminal enterprise disguised as academic excellence. Mrs. Rodriguez, a parent, called out from the audience, "Is this why my son kept finding strange packages in his backpack after field trips? And why the honor students were always selected for those special leadership conferences in other cities?" Another parent added, the pieces falling into place with horrifying clarity. Maria nodded grimly. "They were using your children as unknowing drug mules. The leadership conferences were distribution runs. The honor students were chosen because they were less likely to be searched by law enforcement." A young teacher, Ms. Jennifer Park, who'd only been at the school for 3 months, stood up shakily. "I tried to report strange activities to the district," she said, her voice trembling. "Principal Whitmore told me I was imagining things, that I didn't understand how successful schools operated." "You were placed on administrative leave 2 weeks later," Maria replied, revealing her comprehensive knowledge of the school's operations. "They couldn't fire you without cause, but they made your life miserable enough that you were considering resigning. That ends today." As the agents began reading Miranda rights to the arrested administrators, the community's shock began transforming into anger. These weren't just corrupt officials. These were people who'd used children as pawns in their criminal enterprise while maintaining a facade of educational excellence and moral superiority. "My daughter had a panic attack last month," called out Mr. Williams, a construction worker whose family had moved to the district specifically for its supposed excellent schools. "The counselor said it was because she couldn't handle the academic pressure. Was it really because she discovered what you were doing?" Whitmore finally found her voice, but was weak and desperate. "You don't understand. The test scores, the college admissions, the reputation of the school, I built all of that. These people would have nothing without me. You build it on drug money and child endangerment." Maria responded flatly. "You created a system where academic success was funded by destroying other communities with drugs. You turned education into a criminal enterprise." The DEA agents had secured the 3 primary suspects and were beginning to process the scene when a disturbing detail emerged. Agent Chin discovered a locked filing cabinet in Whitmore's office, containing files on every Latino and Black family in the school district, complete with immigration status investigations, financial records, and notes about potential problems each family might cause. She was documenting us. Mrs. Yamamoto, whose Japanese-American family had been targeted despite being citizens for generations, asked in horror, like, we were criminals to be monitored? Maria held up one of the files for everyone to see. The Gonzalez family was written on the tab, with potential threat, monitor closely stamped in red across the front. Inside were photos of Maria and Sophia at school events, copies of Maria's work schedules from her cover jobs, and notes about their suspicious behavior, which mostly consisted of Sophia excelling academically despite being Latina. They were profiling every family of color, Maria announced, her voice carrying controlled fury, creating a database of people to intimidate or eliminate if they threatened the operation. Your crime? Being successful while not being white. Your threat? Proving their racist assumptions wrong every single day. Sophia, still in her mother's arms, finally spoke up with the clear voice that had won her the lead in the talent show. Mom, were you really pretending this whole time? All those nights you came home tired from both jobs. All those times you helped with homework while worrying about bills. Maria's heart broke at the question. The hardest part of undercover work was the impact on family, the necessary deceptions that felt like betrayals even when they served justice. The jobs were real, Mija. The homework help was real. My love for you was always real. The only thing I was pretending was not being a federal agent. But why didn't you arrest him sooner? Sophia asked a question several parents were clearly thinking. Why let it go on for 6 months? Because we needed evidence of the entire network, Maria explained, addressing the crowd as much as her daughter. Arresting Whitmore alone would have left dozens of other criminals free to continue poisoning communities. We had to document every connection, every transaction, every person involved in this conspiracy. The revelation of the investigation's scope became clearer as more agents reported in. The school's computer lab had been used to manage drug distribution routes. The auto shop was a front for modifying vehicles with hidden compartments. The new stadium lights that the administration had fundraised for aggressively, paid for entirely with drug proceeds, and designed with hidden storage spaces for product. 3 years, Agent Chin announced after reviewing seized documents. This operation has been running for at least 3 years, generating approximately $12 million in drug proceeds. Funds that were laundered through school fundraisers, PTA accounts, and educational foundations. Parents who donated to those fundraisers, who'd sold candy bars and wrapping paper to support what they thought were legitimate school programs, felt the betrayal deeply. They'd been unknowing participants in money laundering, their community spirit exploited to clean drug money. The worst part, Maria continued, still holding Sophia protectively, is that they specifically chose the school because of its diverse population. They knew immigrant families and people of color would be less likely to report suspicious activities to law enforcement. They counted on your fear of authority to protect their operation. Mr. Rodriguez, whose family had fled violence in El Salvador, stood up with tears in his eyes. We came here for safety, for education, for opportunity. And they used our dreams against us. Yes, Maria replied simply. They exploited your hope, your trust, and your desire for your children to succeed. They knew you'd work multiple jobs to pay for this district's housing costs, that you'd sacrifice everything for your children's education, and they used that dedication as cover for their crimes. The sound of more sirens indicated additional arrests were being made throughout the district. The corruption network extended far beyond the school, reaching into local government, law enforcement, and businesses that had been forced to participate or face harassment from officials. Hayes, still on his knees in handcuffs, suddenly spoke up in a desperate attempt to minimize his involvement. It was all Whitmore's idea. She recruited us, threatened us if we didn't cooperate. I have recordings, documents, proof that she was a mastermind. Whitmore's face contorted with rage at the betrayal. You pathetic coward. You were counting money in your office every Friday, sampling product to ensure quality. You personally recruited those honor students for the mule program. Please continue confessing, Agent Chin said drily, ensuring her body camera captured every word. This is very helpful for our prosecution. The two corrupt administrators realized their mistake too late, their panic-driven accusations providing exactly the kind of evidence that would ensure lengthy federal sentences. Brennan remained silent, his expression suggesting he was already calculating plea deals and cooperation agreements in his head. As the arrest continued, the interrupted talent show took on new meaning. What had been intended as a celebration of student achievement had become the stage for exposing systematic corruption. The decorations torn down by the administrators lay scattered across the floor like evidence of their contempt for the community they were supposed to serve. "Can I ask you something?" Ms. Park, the young teacher who tried to report suspicious activities, approached Maria tentatively. "How did you manage it? 6 months of maintaining cover while watching these crimes happen." Maria looked at her daughter, still in her folkloric dress now rumpled from the chaos, and felt the weight of those 6 months pressing down on her. "Every day was a battle between my duty as an agent and my instincts as a mother, watching children being used as unwitting drug mules, seeing families struggling to afford this district while the administrators lived in luxury from drug money, knowing that every day I waited for more evidence meant more poison flowing to the community." She paused, gathering her thoughts while Sophia pressed closer to her side. "But federal cases require overwhelming evidence. We needed to prove not just individual crimes, but the entire conspiracy. Every document I photographed, every conversation I recorded, every financial transaction I tracked built a case that will ensure these people never harm another child." The auditorium had become a crime scene, with agents photographing evidence and interviewing witnesses. Parents who'd come to watch their children perform were now providing statements about suspicious activities they'd observed but been too afraid or uncertain to report. The pattern of intimidation and exploitation became clearer with each testimony. "They denied my son's special education services," one mother revealed, "but offered to reconsider if I stopped asking questions about the new security measures that seemed excessive for a middle school. They threatened to report me to immigration," added Mr. Patel, a naturalized citizen who ran a successful restaurant. "My papers are perfectly legal, but they said they could make problems for my business if I didn't donate to their special fund." Each story added another layer to the pattern of corruption and intimidation. The administrators had created a climate of fear that protected their criminal enterprise while maintaining the school's reputation for excellence. Test scores were inflated, discipline problems were hidden, and any parent who asked too many questions faced retaliation. "Mom," Sophia whispered, "does this mean everything about our school was fake? All the awards, the recognition, the college acceptance rates?" Maria chose her words carefully, aware that many students were listening. "Not everything, Mija. Your hard work was real. Your achievements were real. Your teachers, the honest ones, their dedication was real. What was fake was the administration's claim that they were responsible for your success. You succeeded despite them, not because of them. The distinction mattered. These children had worked hard, studied late, pursued excellence in academics and arts. Their achievements weren't diminished by the corruption of their administrators. If anything, their success despite such obstacles made their accomplishments more impressive." Agent Chin announced the final tally of the school site operation. For 100 kilograms of various narcotics seized, 12.3 million in cash recovered, 47 electronic devices containing distribution records, and evidence of money laundering through 17 different school-related accounts. The numbers were staggering, but the human cost was immeasurable. Every dollar of drug money represented someone's addiction, someone's overdose, someone's family destroyed. The fact that it had been funneled through an institution meant to nurture children made it particularly heinous. As Whitmore was led past the assembled families, she made one last attempt at defiance. "You think you've won," she snarled at Maria. "You think removing us changes anything? The system that created us is still there. Someone else will take our place, and they'll be smarter about it." Maria met her gaze steadily. "Maybe, but they'll know that communities aren't helpless. They'll know that federal law enforcement will infiltrate their operations. They'll know that parents will fight back. And most importantly, they'll know that using children as pawns in criminal enterprises brings the full weight of federal justice down on their heads." She turned to address the community, her voice carrying the authority of federal law and the passion of a parent. "This didn't happen because you weren't vigilant. It happened because criminals exploited your trust in institutions meant to protect your children. But today proves that justice is possible when communities and law enforcement work together. The parents began to understand that they weren't at fault for not seeing what professional criminals had hidden. The very things that made them good parents: trust in educators, focus on their children's success, respect for authority, had been weaponized against them. "What happens now?" asked Mrs. Chun, whose twin daughters were honor students potentially used in the mule program. "How do we trust any school administration after this?" It was the question everyone was thinking but afraid to ask. How does a community heal from such a fundamental betrayal? How do parents send their children back to a school that had been a drug distribution center? How do students trust educators after their principal turned out to be a drug dealer? Federal oversight, Agent Chin announced. The Department of Education and DEA will jointly oversee this district for the next 5 years minimum. New administrators will be thoroughly vetted. Teachers will receive support and protection for reporting suspicious activities, and parents will have direct channels to federal authorities if they observe concerning behavior. But more importantly, Maria added, still holding Sophia close, you'll be involved in rebuilding, parent committees with real power, student voices in administrative decisions, transparency in all financial matters. This school belongs to you, not to whoever sits in the principal's office. The transformation from talent show to federal raid had been shocking, but something powerful was emerging from the chaos. Parents who'd never spoken to each other were exchanging phone numbers. Students who'd been divided by the administration's manipulations were recognizing their shared experience. The community that Whitmore had tried to divide and control was unifying in response to her crimes. "Can we still do our performances?" a small voice asked from the crowd. It was Timothy Chun, a 7th grader, who'd practiced violin for months preparing for this show. "We worked really hard on them." The question hung in the air, a child's simple desire to share his art after witnessing adult corruption at its worst. It was a reminder of what had been stolen from them. Not just a talent show, but innocence, trust, and the celebration of achievement. Maria looked at Agent Chun, who nodded slowly. "The crime scene is secure," Chin announced. "If the community wants to reclaim this space, to show that corruption doesn't win, I think that would be appropriate." It wasn't procedure, wasn't part of any operational manual, but it was human. It was necessary. It was a statement that children's dreams matter more than criminal schemes. Parents began picking up the torn decorations, trying to salvage what they could. Students helped reorganize the performance area while DEA agents, trained for drug raids and tactical operations, found themselves helping to rehang Papal Pick Auto and test sound equipment. "This is irregular," one agent muttered to Chun as he helped adjust a microphone stand. "So is running drugs through a middle school," Chun replied. "Sometimes justice requires adaptation." As the chaos transformed into tentative organization, Sophia tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, can I still dance? Even though everyone knows you're not really just a regular mom." Maria knelt down to her daughter's eye level, seeing her own eyes reflected back, eyes that had witnessed too much for a 12-year-old but still held hope and resilience. "Baby, I've never been just a regular mom. I've been your mom, and that's always been the most important thing I am. Badge or no badge, that never changes. But everyone will treat me differently now," Sophia said, voicing a fear that children of law enforcement often face. "They'll think I'm a narc or that I knew all along." "Some might," Maria admitted, refusing to lie to her daughter after 6 months of necessary deception. "But your real friend will understand. And everyone here just saw that we were victims too, that we were fighting for them even when they didn't know it." The improvised talent show began an hour later, with FBI and DEA agents providing security instead of corrupted school staff. It was surreal and beautiful. Children performing their carefully rehearsed pieces, while federal agents stood guard, protecting the innocence that had almost been destroyed. Timothy Chin played his violin with tears streaming down his face, the melody carrying both sorrow for what was lost and hope for what could be rebuilt. A group of 8th grade girls performed a step routine. They choreographed themselves, their synchronized movements a declaration that corruption hadn't broken their unity. And finally, Sophia took the stage again, this time without fear. She performed her folkloric dance with a passion that transformed trauma into triumph, her colorful dress swirling as she moved to music that celebrated her heritage, the very heritage Whitmore had called contamination. The audience, parents, students, and federal agents, gave her a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. It wasn't just applause for a dance. It was recognition of courage, resilience, and the power of truth over corruption. As the evening ended and families began to leave, many approached Maria to express gratitude, confusion, anger, and hope in equal measures. She accepted it all, understanding that her role as an undercover agent had made her both deceiver and protector, both betrayer and savior in their eyes. 6 months, Mr. Rodriguez said, shaking his head in amazement. You lived among us for 6 months, and we never suspected. That was the point, Maria replied gently. If you had known, you might have acted differently. The administrators might have noticed. The investigation might have failed, and they would have continued poisoning children while pretending to educate them. As the auditorium emptied and crime scene tape was strung across administrative offices, Maria stood with Sophia looking at the stage where everything had changed. The talent show had become something none of them had expected. A revelation, a reckoning, and ultimately, a reclaiming of space that had been corrupted. Agent Gonzalez, Chin called from across the auditorium. We need you for the debrief. This is just the beginning. We have 17 more arrests to coordinate tonight. Maria nodded, then looked down at her daughter still in her performance dress. You were brave tonight, Mija. Braver than you should have had to be. I learned from my mom, Sophia replied, taking her mother's hand. Even when she was pretending to be someone else, she was teaching me to be strong. Together, they walked out of the auditorium into the cool evening air where federal vehicles surrounded the school like protective sentinels. The Roosevelt Middle School sign still proclaimed excellence in education, but now it would mean something different. Excellence despite corruption, education through adversity, and the hard lesson that sometimes those in power are the ones who most need to be stopped. The talent show was over, but the real performance, the complete dismantling of a drug network that had used children as pawns, was just beginning, and Special Agent Maria Gonzalez, mother and protector, deceiver and truth-teller, would see it through to the end. The war room at the DEA's Houston field office looked like a conspiracy theorist's paradise, with photos, documents, and red string creating a web of connections across 12 whiteboards. Special Agent Maria Gonzalez stood at the center, exhausted but determined, addressing a joint task force of DEA, FBI, and Department of Education investigators who'd assembled within hours of the Roosevelt Middle School arrests. Whitmore was middle management, Maria announced, pointing to the principal's photo at the center of the web. The school operation was one tentacle of something much larger. We have 17 hours before news of these arrests reaches the rest of the network. 17 hours to execute simultaneous raids across 4 states. Senior Special Agent David Park studied the board with growing amazement. The corruption reached from local school boards to state education officials, from city councils to police departments, creating an infrastructure that had turned public education into a drug distribution network spanning the entire Southwest. How did they coordinate this without detection? Park asked, examining financial records that showed millions flowing through educational foundations and parent-teacher associations. They used legitimate educational conferences as planning meetings, Maria explained, pulling up surveillance photos on the screen. The annual Southwest Educational Excellence Summit, that was their quarterly distribution planning session. The Leadership in Education Awards, money laundering coordination. They hid in plain sight, using the respectability of education as cover. Sophia sat in a corner of the room with an FBI victim's advocate, her folkloric dress replaced with jeans and a T-shirt, but the strength she'd shown during the talent show crisis remained. She'd insisted on being present, arguing that she'd been living this investigation for 6 months and deserved to see it through. Mom, is that Mrs. Patterson? Sophia pointed to a photo on the board showing the Texas State Board of Education president. She gave me an award last year for academic excellence. Maria's jaw tightened. She also coordinated drug shipments through textbook deliveries. Every district that ordered through her approved vendors received cocaine hidden in sealed boxes marked as educational materials. The drivers thought they were delivering books. The teachers thought they were unpacking supplies. Only a handful of administrators knew what was really being distributed. The scope was staggering. Over 300 schools across Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada had unknowingly been part of the distribution network. The drugs were hidden in everything from athletic equipment to computer shipments, moved by unknowing delivery drivers and received by innocent staff members. Agent Chin pulled up financial analysis on her laptop. We're looking at a $100 million operation over 5 years. They purchased legitimate educational supplies to maintain cover. But every shipment included hidden product. The markup on textbooks covered the cost of bribing officials. Parent fundraisers laundered the proceeds. Every bake sale, every car wash, every magazine drive. Maria added bitterly. Parents thought they were supporting their children's education. They were actually helping clean drug money. The criminals counted on parental dedication to provide cover for their operations. The task force divided into teams, each targeting different nodes of the network. Maria would lead the team focusing on education officials, using her 6 months of undercover intelligence to guide the operations. But first, she had a promise to keep to her daughter. I told you there would be justice, Maria said, kneeling beside Sophia. Not just for us, but for every family they hurt, every child they endangered, every parent they deceived. Will they go to prison for a long time? Sophia asked, her 12-year-old mind trying to process the magnitude of adult evil she'd witnessed. If I do my job right, they'll never hurt another child again, Maria replied, then stood to address the task force. Teams deploy in 30 minutes. Remember, these aren't street dealers. They're educated, connected, and have resources. They'll have lawyers on speed dial and political protection. Document everything. Every piece of evidence matters. As the teams prepared for deployment, news of the Roosevelt Middle School arrests had begun spreading through social media. Parents who'd attended the talent show posted videos of Principal Whitmore calling students contamination before being arrested by federal agents. The footage went viral within hours, sparking outrage and demands for investigation of other schools. Mom, everyone's texting me, Sophia said, showing her phone with hundreds of messages from classmates. They're calling you a hero. They're calling me the bravest kid in Texas. You are brave, Mija. But being brave doesn't mean you weren't scared. It means you stood up despite being scared. That's what real courage looks like. The first wave of arrests began at dawn. Maria's team hit the Texas State Board of Education building, while most employees were arriving for work. Catherine Patterson, the woman who'd given Sophia an academic award while running drugs through schools, was arrested in her office, surrounded by photos of herself with governors, senators, and education advocates. This is a mistake, Patterson insisted as agents seized her computers. I've dedicated 30 years to education. I've improved test scores, increased graduation rates, built programs that help thousands of children. You also distributed approximately $40 million worth of cocaine through schools, Maria stated flatly, holding up evidence documents. You used children as unwitting drug mules. You turned education into a narcotics enterprise. Patterson's composed facade cracked slightly. You don't understand the pressure we were under. Budget cuts, impossible standards, communities demanding excellence without providing resources. We needed funding. So you partner with drug cartels? Maria's voice carried control fury. You decided that poisoning communities was acceptable if it funded your programs? We never hurt the students directly, Patterson said desperately. The drugs went other markets. We kept them away from our schools. Maria pulled out a file containing overdose statistics from the past 5 years. 17 teenagers died from overdoses of cocaine that forensics traced to your distribution network. They were students from the very communities you claimed to be protecting. You didn't keep the drugs away. You just pretended not to see where they ended up. As Patterson was led away in handcuffs, her arrest triggered a cascade of panic throughout the network. Encrypted phones began buzzing with warnings, but the simultaneous nature of the raids meant there was nowhere to run. By noon, 43 education officials, 12 police officers, 8 city council members, and 23 civilian conspirators were in federal custody. The media explosion was immediate and overwhelming. News vans surrounded every school, in the affected districts. Parents demanded answers about whether their children had been exposed to drugs. Teachers questioned every directive they received from administrators. The entire educational infrastructure of the Southwest faced scrutiny that revealed decades of systemic failures. Maria found herself at the center of the media storm, her image from the talent show, badge held high while comforting her daughter, becoming the symbol of the investigation. But she refused most interview requests, focusing instead on building cases that would ensure convictions. 3 days after the initial arrest, Maria sat in a federal interrogation room across from Derek Hayes, the Roosevelt Middle School vice principal who'd broken down during the talent show arrests. His expensive suit had been replaced with federal detention clothing, and his carefully styled appearance had crumbled into disheveled desperation. "I want full immunity," Hayes began, his lawyer beside him nodding supportively. "I have information about the entire network, names, dates, financial records. I was keeping insurance in case something like this happened." "You don't get to negotiate from a position of strength," Maria replied coldly. "We have you on video destroying a children's talent show while helping run drugs through their school. We have financial records showing you personally profited over $3 million. We have testimony from students you recruited as unwitting mules." Hayes' lawyer leaned forward. "My client is willing to provide information about the cartel connections. This goes beyond education officials to international drug trafficking organizations." Maria studied Hayes carefully. During her 6 months undercover, she watched him terrorize struggling students while favoring those whose parents donated to his special funds. He'd been cruel, calculating, and had shown no remorse until faced with consequences. 25 years minimum, possibility reduction based on the value of cooperation. Maria offered. "You testify truthfully about everything, hold nothing back, and maybe you'll be out before you're 70. The lawyer started to object, but Hayes grabbed his arm. "Take the deal," he said desperately. "You don't understand what these people are capable of. Prison is safer than what the cartel will do if they think I'm not cooperating." Over the next 6 hours, Hayes provided a comprehensive breakdown of the network's operations. The education officials hadn't stumbled into drug trafficking. They'd been actively recruited by cartels looking for distribution methods that law enforcement wouldn't suspect. "It started with budget shortfalls," Hayes explained, his voice monotonous with defeat. "Schools were being closed, teachers laid off, programs cut. Then someone approached Whitmore at a conference. They offered to solve our funding problems in exchange for simple logistic support, just receiving and forwarding packages. We didn't even know what was in them at first." "When did you know?" Maria asked, though her investigation had already provided the answer. 6 months in, when the payments got too large to explain. By then, we were trapped. They had evidence of our involvement, threatened our families if we tried to leave. But the money, he trailed off, shame finally showing on his face. "The money made us feel powerful. We could fund any program, approve any budget, live any lifestyle. We told ourselves we were doing it for the students." "You were doing it for yourselves," Maria corrected. "Every decision benefited you personally. You cut special education funding while buying vacation homes. You denied resources to struggling students while driving luxury cars. You created a system where academic success depended on family wealth while pretending to champion equality. The interrogation revealed names of cartel contacts, distribution routes, money laundering methods, and most importantly, the locations of detailed records that the organization kept for insurance and blackmail purposes. Hayes had been right to fear the cartel more than prison. His cooperation was buy-in protection as much as potential sentence reduction. As the investigation expanded, Maria received a call that made her blood run cold. The cartel had noticed the arrests and issued threats against cooperating witnesses and their families. Sophia's school was mentioned specifically, a clear message that they knew who Maria was and where to find her daughter. "We're moving you to protective custody," Agent Park informed Maria, finding her in the break room at 3 a.m, surrounded by case files and empty coffee cups. "You and Sophia, immediate relocation until the threat assessment is complete." "I'm not running," Maria replied firmly. "That's what they want, to scare us into backing down. We're too close to dismantling everything. This isn't a request, Agent Gonzalez." Sophia's safety isn't negotiable. Maria knew he was right, but the thought of uprooting her daughter again, after everything she'd already endured, felt like another victory for the criminals. Still, she'd sworn to protect and serve, and protecting Sophia came before everything else. The safe house was a modest suburban home in Austin, far from their usual community, but close enough for Maria to continue working the case. Sophia adapted with the resilience she'd shown throughout the investigation, but Maria could see the strain in her daughter's eyes. "How long do we have to hide?" Sophia asked one evening, working on homework at the kitchen table while U.S. Marshals maintained watch outside. "Until the trials are over and the cartel understands that threatening us won't stop justice," Maria replied, sitting beside her daughter. "I'm sorry, Mija. You shouldn't have to live like this." "You always taught me that doing the right thing isn't always easy," Sophia said, wisdom beyond her years showing through. "Those families at school, they needed someone to fight for them. We were the someone." The preliminary hearings began 6 weeks after the arrests, with federal prosecutors presenting evidence that painted a picture of systematic corruption that had infected public education across multiple states. The courtroom was packed with parents, teachers, students, and media, all seeking to understand how such evil had flourished in institutions meant to nurture children. Margaret Whitmore entered the courtroom in shackles. Her appearance drastically changed from the polished principal who terrorized families. Her attorney had advised her to appear remorseful, but her eyes still held the cold arrogance that had characterized her reign at Roosevelt Middle School. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, began with a simple statement that captured the magnitude of the crimes. The defendants turned schools into drug distribution centers. They used children as unwitting mules. They destroyed the sacred trust between educators and families. They poisoned communities while claiming to educate them. Maria was called as a lead witness, her testimony spanning 3 days of detailed evidence presentation. She walked the court through 6 months of undercover observation, showing photos, playing audio recordings, presenting financial documents that proved beyond doubt that the defendants had knowingly and willingly participated in drug trafficking. Agent Gonzalez, the defense attorney, challenged during cross-examination, "Isn't it true that you deceived an entire community for 6 months? That you built relationships with families under false pretenses?" "I maintain cover to document crimes against children," Maria replied steadily. "Every relationship I built was genuine, except for concealing my federal employment. Every family I befriended, I was simultaneously protecting from the very people you're defending. But you allowed crimes to continue for 6 months. Children were endangered while you gathered evidence." Maria's composure cracked slightly, the question hitting at her deepest guilt. "Every day I waited was agony. But arresting one principal would have left hundreds of other criminals free. The 6 months of investigation will prevent years of future crimes. It's a calculation I'll live with forever, but it was the right choice." Sophia was not required to testify, but she insisted on providing a victim impact statement. The courtroom fell silent as the 12-year-old approached the podium, her statement clutched in trembling hands. "Principal Whitmore called my culture contamination," Sophia began, her voice growing stronger with each word. She said people like me didn't belong in her school. She said we were welfare cases pretending to be students. But she was a contamination. She was the one who didn't belong in our school. She turned a place of learning into a place of crime, and she used us kids as tools for her greed. She looked directly at Whitmore, showing the same courage she displayed during the talent show. "You try to make me feel ashamed of who I am, but I'm proud to be Latina. I'm proud to be my mother's daughter. And I'm proud that we stop you from hurting any more kids." The courtroom erupted in applause despite the judge's attempts to maintain order. Sophia's simple truth had cut through legal complexities to the heart of the matter. Adults who were supposed to protect children had instead exploited them for profit. The defense attempted to argue entrapment, claiming Maria had encouraged criminal behavior to build her case. But the evidence clearly showed the drug network had been operating for years before Maria arrived. Her investigation had documented existing crimes, not created new ones. Patterson took the stand in her own defense, trying to portray herself as a victim of circumstances who'd made desperate choices to save education funding. But prosecutors presented evidence of her luxury purchases, her offshore accounts, and most damningly, her recorded statements showing complete awareness of the drug trafficking operation. You refer to students as product transport units in this email, Walsh pointed out, displaying the message on courtroom screens. You calculated how many kilograms could be moved per field trip. This wasn't desperation. This was deliberate criminality, using children as tools. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, tears streaming down faces throughout the auditorium. As the evening ended, families approached Maria and Sophia with complex emotions: gratitude for ending the corruption, anger about the deception, hope for the future, fear of what other secrets might be hidden. Maria accepted it all, understanding that her role in their lives defied simple categorization. Agent Gonzalez, said Mr. Rodriguez, whose family had suffered under Whitmore's harassment, I need to know something. During those 6 months, when you came to our homes, ate at our tables, helped our children with homework, was any of it real? Maria met his eyes directly, seeing the pain of betrayal mixed with gratitude for justice. Every moment was real, except my job title. Every conversation, every shared meal, every homework session. That was me, not my cover. The only lie was not telling you I was federal. Everything else was truth. He nodded slowly, processing this complex reality. Our children are safer because of what you did. That matters more than the deception. 1 year after the trials ended, Maria received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph from the talent show. Sophia mid-dance, her dress swirling, her face radiant with joy despite the chaos that would soon follow. Written on the back in a child's handwriting were the words, "Thank you for saving our school from all the kids at Roosevelt." She never learned who sent it, but she framed it and placed it on her desk at the DA office, where she now trained other agents in undercover operations involving children. Her 6 months at Roosevelt had become a case study in balancing investigation needs with child welfare, a template for future operations that might save other communities from similar corruption. Sophia, now 13 and in 8th grade, had returned to Roosevelt Middle School despite offers to attend private schools on scholarship. She wanted to be part of the rebuilding, to show that survivors could thrive where they'd once been victimized. People ask if I'm angry about the 6 months of lies. Sophia wrote in an essay that won a national writing contest. But my mom wasn't lying about loving me, about wanting justice, about fighting for what's right. She was only lying about her job, and that lie saved hundreds of kids from being used by criminals. I can live with that kind of deception if it means that kind of protection. The drug network was dismantled completely, with over 200 convictions resulting from the investigation Maria had initiated. The cartels learned that using schools as distribution centers brought federal attention they couldn't afford. Education officials learned that corruption would be investigated and prosecuted regardless of political connections. But the most important change was in the community itself. Parents became more involved in school administration. Students felt empowered to report wrongdoing. Teachers received protection and support for raising concerns. The culture of fear and silence that had enabled the corruption was replaced with transparency and accountability. During the second annual Justice Day celebration at Roosevelt Middle School, Maria was presented with a Community Service Award. As she stood at the podium where she'd once been forced to watch her daughter be terrorized, she spoke about the price of justice and the value of courage. 2 years ago, this auditorium was a crime scene, a place where children were threatened and parents were humiliated by people who'd sworn to educate and protect. Today, it's a symbol of resilience, proof that communities can fight back against corruption, that justice can prevail even when criminals wear respectable masks. She paused, looking at Sophia in the front row, now a confident teenager who'd found her voice through trauma and triumph. The cost was high. Trust was broken. Innocence was lost. Lives were disrupted. But the alternative, letting criminals continue using children as tools for profit, was unacceptable. Sometimes doing right requires sacrifice. Sometimes protection comes disguised as deception. Sometimes justice arrives in unexpected forms. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, tears streaming down faces throughout the auditorium. As the evening ended, families approached Maria and Sophia with complex emotions: gratitude for ending the corruption, anger about the deception, hope for the future, fear of what other secrets might be hidden. Maria accepted it all, understanding that her role in their lives defied simple categorization. "Agent Gonzalez," said Mr. Rodriguez, whose family had suffered under Whitmore's harassment, "I need to know something. During those 6 months, when you came to our homes, ate at our tables, helped our children with homework, was any of it real?" Maria met his eyes directly, seeing the pain of betrayal mixed with gratitude for justice. "Every moment was real except my job title. Every conversation, every shared meal, every homework session. That was me, not my cover. The only lie was not telling you I was federal. Everything else was truth." He nodded slowly, processing this complex reality. "Our children are safer because of what you did. That matters more than the deception." 1 year after the trials ended, Maria received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph from the talent show. Sophia mid-dance, her dress swirling, her face radiant with joy despite the chaos that would soon follow. Written on the back in a child's handwriting were the words, "Thank you for saving our school from all the kids at Roosevelt." She never learned who sent it, but she framed it and placed it on her desk at the DA office, where she now trained other agents in undercover operations involving children. Her 6 months at Roosevelt had become a case study in balancing investigation needs with child welfare, a template for future operations that might save other communities from similar corruption. Sophia, now 13 and in 8th grade, had returned to Roosevelt Middle School despite offers to attend private schools on scholarship. She wanted to be part of the rebuilding, to show that survivors could thrive where they'd once been victimized. People ask if I'm angry about the 6 months of lies. Sophia wrote in an essay that won a national writing contest. But my mom wasn't lying about loving me, about wanting justice, about fighting for what's right. She was only lying about her job, and that lie saved hundreds of kids from being used by criminals. I can live with that kind of deception if it means that kind of protection. The drug network was dismantled completely, with over 200 convictions resulting from the investigation Maria had initiated. The cartels learned that using schools as distribution centers brought federal attention they couldn't afford. Education officials learned that corruption would be investigated and prosecuted regardless of political connections. But the most important change was in the community itself. Parents became more involved in school administration. Students felt empowered to report wrongdoing. Teachers received protection and support for raising concerns. The culture of fear and silence that had enabled the corruption was replaced with transparency and accountability. During the second annual Justice Day celebration at Roosevelt Middle School, Maria was presented with a Community Service Award. As she stood at the podium where she'd once been forced to watch her daughter be terrorized, she spoke about the price of justice and the value of courage. 2 years ago, this auditorium was a crime scene, a place where children were threatened and parents were humiliated by people who'd sworn to educate and protect. Today, it's a symbol of resilience, proof that communities can fight back against corruption, that justice can prevail even when criminals wear respectable masks. She paused, looking at Sophia in the front row, now a confident teenager who'd found her voice through trauma and triumph. The cost was high. Trust was broken. Innocence was lost. Lives were disrupted. But the alternative, letting criminals continue using children as tools for profit, was unacceptable. Sometimes doing right requires sacrifice. Sometimes protection comes disguised as deception. Sometimes justice arrives in unexpected forms. Today, it's a symbol of resilience, proof that communities can fight back against corruption, that justice can prevail even when criminals wear respectable masks. She paused, looking at Sophia in the front row, now a confident teenager who'd found her voice through trauma and triumph. The cost was high. Trust was broken. Innocence was lost. Lives were disrupted. But the alternative, letting criminals continue using children as tools for profit, was unacceptable. Sometimes doing right requires sacrifice. Sometimes protection comes disguised as deception. Sometimes justice arrives in unexpected forms. The applause was genuine and sustained, but Maria barely heard it. She was watching Sophia, seeing in her daughter's eyes not just pride but understanding. The little girl who cried over her ruined birthday cake had become a young woman who understood that sometimes parents had to make impossible choices to protect not just their own children, but all children. As they drove home that evening, Sophia asked a question that had haunted Maria for 2 years. If you had to do it again, knowing everything that would happen, would you? Maria considered lying, providing easy comfort, but Sophia deserved truth after everything they'd endured. Yes, she said simply, because every child in that school deserved protection, because every parent deserved truth, because sometimes wearing a badge means making sacrifices that hurt the people you love most, but prevent even greater harm to others. Then I'm glad you did, Sophia replied, taking her mother's hand. Even though it was hard, even though it hurt, because now hundreds of kids are safe, and that matters more than our 6 months of difficulty. The investigation that had begun with Maria working 2 cover jobs and living a double life had ended with systematic change that would protect students for generations. The talent show that had been destroyed by corruption had been reclaimed by community. The mother and daughter who'd been forced to deceive their neighbors had become symbols of courage and justice. As they pulled into their driveway, their real home, no longer a safe house, Maria saw neighborhood children playing in the street without fear, parents chatting on porches without suspicion, a community healed from the wounds of betrayal and strengthened by the process of seeking justice. We're home, she told Sophia, but the word meant more than just a physical location. They were home in a community that knew their truth and accepted them anyway, that understood the complexity of their deception and chose gratitude over resentment, that had learned to trust again despite having that trust betrayed by those in power. The DEA would have other cases, other investigations requiring Maria's expertise. But nothing would ever compare to those 6 months at Roosevelt Middle School, when a mother's love and a federal agent's duty aligned to save children from adults who'd forgotten that education was about nurturing souls, not trafficking drugs. Margaret Whitmore would spend the next 3 decades in federal prison, her teaching credentials revoked, her pension forfeited, her legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about corruption and consequences. Catherine Patterson would die in prison, her decades of educational advocacy overshadowed by her final years of criminal enterprise. But Maria and Sophia Gonzalez would continue forward, forever changed but not broken, deceived but not defeated, bearing scars that told stories of courage rather than surrender. They'd learned that justice sometimes came disguised as betrayal, that protection sometimes required deception, and that the price of doing right was always worth paying, even when it cost everything they'd built. The talent show had been saved. The school had been reclaimed. The community had been protected. And in the end, that mattered more than 6 months of necessary lies. Justice had prevailed, even if it had arrived in the form of a mother pretending to be something less than she was while secretly being something more than anyone imagined. If this story of a mother's courage to protect innocent children moved you, subscribe for more stories where federal justice exposes corruption in places meant to nurture our youth. Share this everywhere. Let the world see what happens when criminals disguise themselves as educators and parents fight back with federal support. Comment below what you would do if you discovered your child's school was being used for drug trafficking. Like this video if you believe no institution is too powerful to escape justice when children are endangered. Your voice protects the next generation.